All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're doing a cold, hard, scientific audit of the most infamous crash in modern history. We aren't going to be looking at blurry photos or rehashing witness testimony. Instead, we're strictly diving into the hardcore materials science of it all.
You know, the sources we're digging into today present this absolutely wild premise. They suggest the military didn't just find a broken ship at Roswell back in 1947. No, they found a material that fundamentally breaks the laws of gravity, and they've spent the last 70 years trying to figure out how to grow it in a lab. It really makes you wonder, what if alien technology isn't magic at all, but rather heavily suppressed quantum physics?
So here's the core thesis we're exploring today. The physical evidence, specifically that recovered crash debris, was actually a highly engineered Terahertz waveguide. According to the documents, this stuff doesn't just block radar. It literally manipulates the quantum vacuum itself.
To break this all down, our forensic audit is going to follow 4 steps. First, the Roswell anomaly. Second, the metallurgy of deception. Third, weaponizing the Terahertz gap. And finally, the solid-state endgame.
Okay, starting off with Part 1, the Roswell anomaly and the physical evidence. To really grasp the physics here, we have to track the actual material. In 1947, this anomalous debris is scooped up at Roswell. Fast forward to the late 1990s, and physical samples of this exact debris, which intelligence circles playfully referred to as Art's parts, are leaked to the legendary radio host Art Bell. For decades, these pieces just kind of circulated in the shadows before finally, in 2019, being legally acquired by an organization called TTSA for formal independent laboratory study.
Now, for a long time, the mainstream scientific establishment and military debunkers basically just laughed this off. They officially labeled these physical samples as mere industrial slag, useless junk left over from some lead smelting process. But as we dig into the actual lab results, the sources argue this was a deliberate cover story, a way to maintain a strict quarantine on the physics.
Which brings us to Section 2, the metallurgy of deception. Let's do a subatomic breakdown.
When independent metallurgical labs actually got their hands on this stuff and put it under an electron microscope, they found it was made of alternating microscopically thin layers of bismuth and magnesium zinc. And here's the kicker. The bismuth layers measured exactly 1 to 4 microns thick. The source material points out that there is absolutely zero reason for any human engineer, especially back in the 1940s, to go through the massive trouble of perfectly layering these specific metals at microscopic thicknesses just to create trash.
Look at the extreme contrast between these two elements. Bismuth is the most naturally diamagnetic element on Earth, meaning it violently repels magnetic fields. It acts as an absolute perfect mirror for electromagnetic energy. Magnesium, on the other hand, is the exact opposite. It's incredibly lightweight, structurally strong, and highly conductive.
So, when you layer a perfect magnetic mirror with a superconductive structural metal at the nanoscale, you aren't just making strong armor. You're building what's known as a quantum electromagnetic trap. This is a synthetic metamaterial engineered at the subatomic level to possess properties that simply do not exist in nature.
Moving on to Section 3, weaponizing the Terahertz gap.
Here is where the real secret hides, right in the thickness of those layers. In physics, the size of a waveguide must perfectly match the wavelength of the energy it's trying to manipulate. Those 1 to 4 micron bismuth layers correspond exactly to the terahertz frequency band. That's the highly energetic electromagnetic spectrum sitting right between microwaves and infrared light. Basically, this material is a physical schematic for a terahertz waveguide.
And that brings us to the hardcore physics. The sources argue this stuff doesn't just absorb energy, it manipulates the boiling zero-point energy of empty space via the Casimir effect. If you look at this equation, that little d at the bottom represents the microscopic distance between those metal layers. By strictly controlling that distance, the math proves you can create a localized region of negative pressure, which essentially lowers the vacuum energy density. Okay, let's map out how this actually creates localized anti-gravity. It's like a chain reaction. First, the bismuth-magnesium sandwich traps that high-frequency terahertz energy. Second, bouncing that energy around inside the waveguide polarizes the quantum vacuum. Third, following the Casimir effect we just talked about, this lowers the vacuum energy density inside that localized shell. And finally, because inertia is essentially an electromagnetic drag force interacting with that vacuum, dropping the density drops the craft's effective inertia to virtually zero. It literally sweats a gravitational torsion field. It's incredible.
And that leads us to our final section, Part 4, the solid-state endgame and modern metamaterials.
According to the documents, the aerospace syndicate spent decades and literally trillions of dollars scouring the periodic table trying to replicate this exact effect. Back in the 1980s, they started with these heavy, violently vibrating barium titanate ceramics to hold massive electrical charges. Then, in the 90s, they moved to supercooled YDCO superconducting rings. But eventually they abandoned heavy metals and spinning plasmas entirely to perfectly replicate the 100% solid-state bismuth magnesium metamaterials originally found at Roswell.
Now, if you're sitting there thinking, well, this is all just theoretical physics, you just need to look at the paper trail left on October 17, 2019. Remember, the military called this material useless slag for decades, right up until this specific date.
This is a pretty stunning confession of intent. On that exact date, the U.S. Army signed a formal Cooperative Research and Development Agreement, a CRADA, with the civilian organization holding the arts parts debris. The Army explicitly stated they were studying these exact bismuth magnesium metamaterial samples to develop active camouflage, beamed energy propulsion, and, most importantly, inertial mass reduction. The forensic audit laid out in these sources suggests something incredible. The military didn't invent modern metamaterials out of thin air. They spent 70 years reverse engineering them from this exact 1947 crash debris. And why does this matter to us today? Because this waveguide technology is supposedly what allows the solid-state hulls of the modern Black Fleet, like those infamous white Tic Tac drones you've probably heard about, to trap internal microwave energy, sweat a vacuum bubble, and skip across the atmosphere at Mach 20 without melting or breaking apart.
So, I want to leave you with one final forensic question to really chew on. If alien technology is truly just suppressed physics and this debris was supposedly just industrial slag, why in the world did the US military spend billions of dollars and decades of research trying to reverse engineer its exact chemical structure? It really makes you wonder, what else is hiding in the periodic table of the deep state? Think about that for a bit, and I'll see you in the next explainer.